Hey, Taylor, thanks so much for joining us in our little scenic tour of Amsterdam in our fancy Audi. Why don't you, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so my name's Taylor Dolezal. I'm the head of ecosystem at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And yeah, it's been fun to run this very small little conference here in Amsterdam.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you and 12,000 of your closest friends, right?
It's a birthday party.
right, exactly. I can't imagine. That would be a very large birthday party. So what I always have to ask is kind of like, all right, what does an ecosystem mean?
So our ecosystem, there's so much to focus on within the cloud native community. Honestly, there's there are the projects, there are the people, the working groups, the tags, so many different things. I'm mostly focused on the end users, our end user members, the people that are pulling down cloud native technologies and using them to power their business and their platform. They're not taking it and reselling it. They're not consultancies. They're folks like Mercedes, Audi, Airbnb, Reddit, and they're actually using that to leverage their business, make it up level it essentially.
And so what's been I think you said you've doing this about a year or something. What's been the kind of most pronounced? I mean, customers are lovely and everything, but it's one of the things that comes up a lot for us with Kubernetes is kind of like it's kind of a change in thinking, a change in style. How have you seen that move, or how has that been, in your experience?
It's been really interesting, honestly. So folks, the whole argument for open source has been won for many years.
Yeah.
So that's the most exciting thing is to have people align in that vision. And now it's about level setting around, okay, I've achieved Kubernetes. It's like, no, that's not the finish line. Yeah, you've said there's so much more.
The box. Yeah.
And that's what's most fun is hearing what workflows people are adopting, seeing where contributions are going now too, because there was seeing the focus on Kubernetes, so it's stable. There's not as much need to come in and develop out things, and so you see those contributions go down a bit, but that's a good thing. It's the tapering off, it's the hardening, and so with that happening, people are focusing on Argo, OpenTelemetry, Backstage, these other areas that need, attention, focus, and code contributions and discussion.
Right. It's funny how you say, kind of open source is kind of one. I mean, because
I'm biased.
I was doing an interview with somebody else, who kind of grew up in tech, kind of the same way I did, and we both are like just blown away by we both remember when open source was like banned in most of the organizations we worked with. It was not okay to be using it, and it's like just so different now. It's just crazy. It's kind of interesting. I do wonder how much of that checking of the box, for Kubernetes, is kind of happens a lot, I imagine. And it seems like kind of your experience. Is there anything else that you've found has been particularly, kind of like that, or anything else that, has really, I don't know, made you look forward to the future? Like, what are you looking for next?
Yeah, so with what's next, I think that looking at edge computing, internal development platforms, that's what a lot of the discussions are about future states right now. And then one that is still kind of a stumbling block for some organizations, and I've dealt with that in past roles, is how to approach the conversation of business value. So that, because a lot of engineers and engineering teams also get it. They understand the why behind Kubernetes and cloud native and how to work with many of these technologies. But when it comes to advocating for it and pitching that within their internal corporations, organizations, it can be difficult because you might have executives who are like, oh, we did this 15 years ago. It just went so poorly.
Right.
And so there's still that a little bit of that historical context that needs to be broken. Or like, no, it's different now for real. Here's why. Here's what it is. We can run much more than WordPress on it. Just all those conversations.
Yeah, there's some of that legacy from kind of that service-oriented architecture days of the when everything was top down, right? And I think one of the things is that Kubernetes is kind of like on the fence in the sense like if you get into containers, that's very kind of bottom up, right? But then eventually, if you use containers enough, you start to notice that, oh my God, I cannot manage all these things, and so you need something like Kubernetes. But Kubernetes, you can kind of do in small bits, right, and then keep adding to it. And is that how you've seen the growth happen, or are you mostly seeing kind of an all-in commitment from like an organization at first?
That's what's been. That's a great question. There's been that want for some organizations to have the entire playbook ready, and that doesn't. You can do that. It just takes a lot longer.
Yeah, I was an old friend of mine, a Python maintainer. Like, used to tell the story about an organization he was at where they did that. They did the whole top-down thing, and it worked. And I was like, really?
Do tell.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so all these war stories about kind of doing this at the full, the right way, and I was just so blown away about how it actually, they pulled it off. I was like, okay. Yeah, because it's so unusual, right? Normally,
we did waterfall deployments using Agile. So
right.
It's like, how did you do that?
Yeah. So I'm always super impressed if somebody can actually pull that off. But I would say it's definitely uncommon. So that's been, so you're kind of seeing the pieces come in and people getting participating and then essentially adoption over time.
Exactly. Yeah, that it's really just starting small and then iterating up to transform or change folks' workflows, essentially.
Yeah. And do you have any specific war stories about that?
I'm trying to think. I'm certain I do. From personal experience, when I was at Disney Studios, I saw a lot of woes on that front, and that was a lot of our internal transformation there while I worked there. Mm-hmm. We had, over hundreds of applications, and so it was, we deploy things a little bit differently here on every single team, which was untenable for a team of 5 systems engineers, which we were when I got there. So we had aligned pretty early on, we want to simplify this, we want to use Kubernetes, and that became our common language to work with teams and share concepts, and there was a lot of reluctance at first as any change, but it was nice to really align with those folks, and at the end of it, after all the struggles had been gone through, they're like, hey, this actually works really well. This really, we weren't trying to make it hard or hurt you or push you through something.
It wasn't intentionally painful.
It's that's just what good learning feels like.
Right. One of the things, I think we mentioned, I've definitely mentioned on the show before, but I teach at Boston University, and one of the things that we do periodically as part of one of the programs I'm involved in is these kind of ideation sessions. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating about cloud native is, they kind of walk into the room with their idea, and we kind of have a few different perspectives. And so I'm usually there for the tech perspective. And, with cloud native, one of the things that I think a lot of the students have a really hard time wrapping their head around is no, you want to write as little code as humanly possible, right? We want to, actually kind of capture all the other code that's all over the internet, either as APIs or things like Kubernetes or whatever, so that you're writing this little shim that's pulling it all together. And especially for an MVP, if you want to do a startup, how was your experience with some of that in, places like Disney or with some of the people you've been talking to? Is that an easy concept or a common concept, or is it more a lot of people doing big iron development and then and not realizing how much easier it could be?
Definitely the latter. I think that it is those light bulb moments, and that's truly what I live for too. To see that spark, once you're able to share that idea and kind of have that buy-in with someone. I think as it pertains to writing less code and figuring out the right pieces to put together, a lot of that has been figuring out the right way to shift left, because I used to shift left all the time when I was younger. I'd be told to clean my room and I'd push everything into the closet.
Good choice.
So you can get to a point where it's too much, too far, but that's the delicate balance that teams are figuring out now. And okay, do we have a platform team? Do we have a systems team? What makes sense, and how do we the proper abstractions that's the most difficult thing. That's the art piece. That's the creative and slam poetry part of putting together a team.
I think that's a common meme for people to refer to development as slam poetry, right?
It's we're picking up. That's my fetch.
Right. The kind of related question I was just thinking about was, the other problem with that kind of model, right, is like knowing kind of who to bet on. And it's even kind of harder in kind of the open source world where it's like, will this technology be, a thing in a year, right? And so how do you talk to, people in the kind of ecosystem about making those decisions or, identifying good bets, basically?
Another great question. It's so if you need a lottery ticket.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's really difficult, and that's one thing that I like that the CNCF has done is kind of bucket projects within different levels of maturity. So we have sandbox, incubating, and graduated. Graduated is an incredibly safe bet. It's been adopted by multiple industries. You've crossed the finish line and then some. As you start to take a look at incubating projects, there are some sandbox projects that are in a good state, but they just haven't been used widely. They might be really code complete or coming from a really good engineering place or have a great developer experience. But I think that's the distinction that is always difficult to make. But really, what I'm seeing is that it's as a foundation, we don't pick winners. We're not kingmakers, and that's been an interesting thing to take a look at and balance too. Because when I was at end user organizations, that's what I wanted. I wanted the recommended architecture. Like, please just give me the guide. I'm interested in how I put all these things together. Yeah, and that's exactly the thing that we don't provide, but. And I get why, but now being inside the organization, now it's about elevating folks and their stories, what they're doing, what they're putting together. So working with people to share the community guide of what they found worked for them, and then pair that with a workflow. So that's some upcoming content that we're making on that front, and refurbishing our end user radar. Those are the kind of moves that we're making to help be a better coach within the community and shed more insight on all of the ways in which people are accomplishing their workflows and workloads.
Is there, kind of related to that, and I don't think this exists, but I'll ask the question anyway. Is there any, ideas around, levels of maturity of maybe consulting organizations that you can recommend, who can recommend or give you recommendations? Is there any thought around, I don't know, at least kind of giving a list of organizations that you might want to go talk to?
We do have some members of the organization that are consultancies, and we just had some that joined, but I think that's a good starting guide, and really the only one that we have right now that's easy to quantify. Though I like that idea. I think that's something that I've heard that idea a few times, and just could these
it was my idea.
It's like I'm going to cite you.
Unique.
I'm going to cite you. I'm excited. Yeah, it's good. But I think that because consultancies are working so much with these technologies, it would be a shame to not hear how they're able to put things together, or if they've been able to figure out a pattern that works really well. Right.
It's one of those things, like, I was in consulting for a long time, and one of the things, especially in those days when open source had most definitely not one, it was so difficult to share anything with, except within one, client, right? Every client really wanted everything that you were involved with to be this completely locked down and, IP protected and stuff. And I understand why that was their default choice, but I definitely didn't agree with it. Like, there were so many ways that we could have found to do some sharing without violating their privacy at all, right? And so I've still found that kind of difficult and depressing. But it's kind of, that's why I was thinking about maybe, is there a way you can kind of move that outside of the private, enterprise?
With that, I think that we're seeing some being in a vendor neutral space and just everybody being aligned on cloud native as the end objective. We are seeing things like we have a marketing subcommittee, and so there are a whole bunch of folks that are marketing products from different companies, in some cases competing companies, but they're sharing best practices on how to market to folks, what to get involved in.
Oh, interesting.
So you have these things where people, kind of be going head to head with each other, but they're like, no, we get it. And then you have these cool mashups artists, and
Right.
it's not like the musical battles between artists kind of thing. It's more collabs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I definitely want to see that, and I think the same thing is possible when it comes to consultancies and figuring out a base, because they'll all benefit from that, right? It's
Yep.
do you want to spend the time figuring out the basement floor when y'all can work on it together?
Right,
It's like
right.
it's a win-win for everybody.
So I just want you to know that now I see the next, like, I don't know if you ever worked with like local or like state government or whatever, but you have this RFP process, and there's always an RFP like meeting. I can't remember what they used to call it, but basically where you can kind of go and ask questions before you actually like give your response to the proposal. And so now what I'm envisioning is that meeting is actually taking place in an underground bar, and they're doing it with slam poetry.
Yeah, on a houseboat. Yeah,
Right,
you're like,
right.
what?
Oh yeah, exactly. So that is now stuck in my head as how all consultants, find out about whether or not they should bid on a project.
I can't wait to see your biopic and that be the starting.
Yeah, exactly. So bringing it back to Amsterdam, what are you most excited about, or what has already happened at KubeCon that you were really looking forward to, or it still hasn't happened yet?
So what still hasn't happened yet is I've seen a couple tulips, but definitely definitely gonna spending some time here afterwards. So really excited to check that out.
That's cool.
I heard about the bikes and the bicycles, but
It is for reals, right?
Overwhelmed.
Yeah. Well,
the
only other times I've really been in Amsterdam, I was mostly like more towards the center, where it's definitely not as pronounced. I don't think. I think it's because out here there a lot more people going to work on their bike. And even for the bikes, the city streets downtown are too small, right? But yeah, it's been pretty impressive. Are you a biker at home?
Yeah. So live in Los Angeles, so don't bike as much as I want to, honestly. But done Ragbri, biked across to Iowa.
Oh wow!
And so it's absolutely love biking when I get the chance to do so. But probably do some of that here, and then it's on Friday. Gonna check out one of the boats and just like take a little tour around the city. So it should be beautiful.
Yeah. I can't remember what I was here for last time. I do know that, so Amsterdam tends to have weather and also be a place that is a layover spot. So a colleague of mine and friend of mine, he and I got stuck here for like 3 days. And I was like, in the grand scheme of things, one of the better places to get stuck.
Yes,
oh my God, it was great.
Yeah.
So we actually had a really good time. Yeah, exactly. Well, and you're on an airline's expense account, right? Which is also nice, rather than having to fight it with the company back home. So that was pretty cool. So definitely tulips. The bikes have been impressive. Was there anything specifically about KubeCon that you think it sounds really interesting or cool or whatever?
I've loved what I've been hearing about the WebAssembly community and components within WebAssembly. Just seeing it kind of get further and further along as it comes to folks being able to work with that technology. There's been a lot of whisperings about, is that the next Kubernetes? And at the end of the day, it's a different way to write your apps.
Kubernetes.
We've been chasing that for a long time too. The write once, run anywhere, of course. But,
or write once, debug everywhere.
It's like we're gonna find it. We're gonna find find the one true ring.
As long as Gollum's not involved.
It's like we try to keep him out of our community.
Right, exactly.
We have ways to deal with that.
Right. If you don't mind slightly offensive terminology, you should look up an old Donnie Burkholz talk about how basically he actually did some data science around here is our community before, then here's our community after we got rid of this troll, who was a very strong contributor. I shouldn't say troll. Let's say somebody who was not the most pleasant person to be around, and yet was a big contributor, and so it was like a loss, right? But so let's not let Gollum into the org if possible.
But that's been wonderful to see. I've really been excited about that, and then always the hallway track. It's just my favorite. When I've come to KubeCons in the past as an attendee, that was always something I was worried about. Was I'd go to the talks, and it was kind of expected that you'd come back with a write-up, talk about the talks and everything that you learned in them. And so it was San Diego as my first in-person KubeCon.
Okay.
I ended up skipping many of the talks and just going and chatting with folks within the community that I was working with. And it was so much more beneficial. Just that networking aspect has been is always one of my favorite things here.
Yeah.
I don't live next door to you, so it's great to see we're in the same city as you.
Right. So I was like, well, actually, there's somebody who's pretty strongly, mostly in, I guess, more the Linux community, but open source in general. Deb Nicholson, who OCI, I think, where she was at. But she and I actually live, I don't know, like 2 miles from each other, and almost never see each other there at all, but we used to see each other all the time at conferences, which was really very amusing. But I did want to explain real quickly, because I think it's surprising how few people know what the hallway track is. And so, a hallway track basically means like the walking around between the sessions and talking to people in the hallway. And it's really one of the things that we do with, I run a much smaller conference called DevConf US in Boston every year, but we offer what we do is attendee training, or as well as like speaker coaching or whatever, or attendee coaching, whatever you want to call it. So we actually, anybody who kind of signs up, we kind of have them show up in advance, to the equivalent of a Zoom call, and talk through, okay, this is the kind of stuff you should do before you even get to the conference. And then at the conference, there's like a couple of opportunities where they can kind of meet together, and then so you have a little bit of a posse as well, which is kind of nice. And then cool. Also you have like a coach who kind of drops in and is like, hey, have you done these 5 things, this is and explain things like, here's what the hallway track is, because the point of the conference is actually to be like a first conference for either a speaker, which was what its original intent was, but what we found was that it's also kind of, let's try to make it a first conference for an attendee as well. So yeah, I think it's a cool idea, but that's why I wanted to explain hallway track.
That's really cool. I would like that concept of being able to educate folks on how to experience the conference as an attendee, because you're right. It's not. I feel like there's so many I've been to where I've been like, you're trying to acclimate, and it's just like, no, you can make it just like code. You can make a framework for this too.
Exactly. Well, what's funny is that I think I've been going to conferences now like too long or something, because I basically only go to the hallway track. Like I almost never get an opportunity to actually see a talk, or like eventually, this is what's funny about Friday, is that I'm kind of half thinking about going to see the tulips on Friday morning, because I won't be here long enough to get really another opportunity. But Friday is the day where I'll actually be able to have, everything will have slowed down enough where I could actually go and sit in some talks, and actually pay attention for a few minutes. So it's kind of like this tough balance, because periodically I like just hearing about tech, because I'm a nerd, But yeah, I did want to also ask you, because it's funny how much has been coming up, but maybe we'll get back to WASM after that, because I really like WASM. But before that, I keep having in the interviews I've been doing, for both in the car but also on the show, backstage just keeps coming up. And I was just kind of curious, like, any theories as to why? Do you think it's really like fulfilling a need, or like what's your experience with it been? I feel like you get the 500-foot view on all these technologies, so I'm just kind of curious. We're thinking about adopting it with the program we do because basically we kind of run a very junior consultancy with the worst turnover of basically 300 people every semester. So it would be really nice for the continuity of projects. So to do something like backstage. So I've been kind of gathering more information about it, because it sounds really, really cool. Yeah,
so it really has been coming up quite a bit, and I feel like it's one of the only CNCF projects that's really filling that space as it pertains to internal development platforms. And it's also, I feel like it's coming up quite a bit too, because everybody does have an opinion on how to be able to implement that, or write a plugin for it and share knowledge, or your endpoints, your documentation.
Right.
It's not always straightforward.
Right.
It's never straightforward. So that's something that is helping make that easier for folks. So I think that's definitely, I've been hearing the same thing with that coming up, because even like you said, as it pertains to conferences and level setting and trying to figure out how to best experience things, Backstage is really helpful for getting folks running much more quickly.
Oh, interesting. So you're using it to actually manage the conference?
No, that's what I'm saying. That would be fantastic.
Oh, yeah, right.
If somebody's writing a plugin, please. Yeah, how to experience KubeCon.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that'd be a pretty slick.
It's I'm going to work on my CFP after this. That's kind of gone hand in hand with seeing some more focus on cloud development environments as well, and things like code spaces within GitHub. There's people how do we get contributions with less friction and also make it easier for maintainers. There's no shortage of good ideas on how to things that we can add to projects, or ways to get a competency score or a maturity score for a project. Where's it at? How's it doing? Tests, contributions, etc. But that puts a ton of weight on maintainers.
Right.
And so things like Backstage and some other projects, being able to figure out how to make everything work together is quite helpful. Yeah.
For us, it's the continuity, across teams, and also is basically what we have is when you think about contributor guides on an open source project, we basically have to have an awesome one basically every semester, and because the projects are often sometimes multi-semester, sometimes multi-year, and kind of being able to get the team back to the place where the last team left off as quickly as possible is really difficult. But they also the projects are different enough that you can't just uniformly say, okay, it'll be React with Postgres or whatever. Sometimes they're on GitHub, but some organizations, they have private repos, or they're using something else altogether. So we have enough variability that we can't just have some stock model, which is unfortunate. Cool. So I don't know if we have time to really talk about WASM. I will say, it sounds like you're kind of in the same boat where it's WASM, it sounds really fascinating. I think it's really, if you're not looking at it already, you should be, because it's got a lot of promise.
And so many orgs are using it. I've been wowed with what Adobe's been working on that front. Definitely not enough time to jump into AI and all that fun stuff too. But it just really, I think that's been some of the biggest points of fascination here at the conference too. SBOMs and SBOMs, edge computing, IDP, all of these things. I feel like in the past too, it's been you've heard the thread of at least one very prominent topic, but now we're starting to splinter and getting some really good contenders.
Well, I think WASM in particular is one of those things where it's if you just kind of see it in passing, I don't think people really connect on its power. So I think as people are starting to be oh, I see now, it's really gonna just kind of just go straight vertical.
It's even the transformative thing being able to up-level older workflows, things running in Fortran or COBOL. Actual stories we can use WASM and then run that on an airplane now, and that's what we need. And so kind of encapsulating some of the older things or integrating with older enterprise entities
that aren't ready
systems
for a rewrite per se.
Exactly. That at least is the shim to then help them get to the next step, which nobody wants to write that code. Ultimately, they're okay, but that's what's going to truly transform it too. And then we get to all work on the fun stuff. We have to do our chores.
Exactly. I'm still holding my breath. So I hear you. Well, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you around the conference. And hopefully you have enjoyed your lovely ride around Amsterdam in this fancy Audi.
This is great. No, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of fun. I think we're going to keep doing it. We might do it in Chicago too. So, why not, right?
Grab some pizza. I won't. If I get invited back, I won't bring it in the car.
Right. Exactly.
I'm serious.
There will be a no pizza rule in the vehicle. I'm pretty sure that will be a mandate from